everyone, Rhoda here. As some of you may have heard by now, last week we got the sad news of the passing of Obie Yadgar, a former guest of the podcast and someone I came to have a really close bond with. Obie passed away on August 30th, 2023, after a year-long battle with cancer. I'm so grateful that we got to know him through this interview, and I'll always be thankful that I got to know him in his last year of life. I will truly miss our conversations, his voice and stories, his willingness to always learn something new, like audacity or how to play the guitar, and his unabashed, earnest love for music, writing, and everyone he loved. We decided to re-release the original interview with Obie in his memory. We're thinking of his daughters, Sonia and Sadie, and their families, and wishing them strength and peace. May his memory be a blessing.
The great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake. I firmly believe that.
I have listened to the radio all my life. When just a boy, with the lights off in the family room where the old Phillips reigned, basking in the soft glow from the dial, I spent hours being transported by the radio to lands I would probably never see. Listening to the radio opened windows into languages and cultures I could only dream about. Outside our home, the real world went by. Inside, I scanned my world with one hand on the radio knob, a cup of tea on the table beside me. In Vietnam, while I served as a U.S. Army combat correspondent, my little transistor radio helped me escape to corners far away from the war's cruelty and stupidity, ugliness and waste, death and destruction. Every day, my little radio gave me one more chance to hear exotic music and voices, just in case it would be my last. An Assyrian growing up in Tehran, Iran, I discovered early on that our radio was my ticket to places I had only read about or seen in Hollywood movies. I imagined myself as the fifth musketeer, fighting for justice alongside D'Artagnan. I saw me falling in love with the portrait of Jean Tierney the way Dana Andrews did in the film classic Laura. And of course, I was William Holden, dancing by that river in Kansas with the stunning Kim Novak in Picnic. Like all of youth, mine had its own joys and sorrows, curiosities and anxieties, and my radio was the doorway that made my dreams more magical. I would turn the dial and find my own private box seat in the world's concert halls. The music was as diverse as the languages I heard and as colorful. It opened my ears to sound. That same sound created in me a thirst for music, as diverse as the lands that composed it. The languages I heard filled my ears with tones which years later I would use as a writer and a classical music radio announcer. The stories in Obie's opus are from those radio days. I still listen to radio, not as much as I did when I was a boy with a head full of dreams and all the time in the world to play with them. Radio has lost part of its luster in this age of explosive technology where you can link up with any part of the world in an instant. But I still see it sparkle. My old radio, the one from the old country, is gone along with many of the other things from my youth. My new radio is a big black box with enough buttons to decorate a troop of dragoons. It probably pulls in far more radio stations than I ever could in the old days, but it is not the same. Some late nights now, when I take a break from writing, I brew a pot of tea and sit in the dark, pushing the buttons and spinning the dial on my new radio. From the study in my home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I once again travel to places beyond my reach. In those late hours, I dust off the gallery of images tucked away in my memory, taking flight once again to the faraway places I visited as a child. The only thing missing is the glow from the old Phillips dial. Hey everyone, Rhoda here. Welcome to episode 191 of the Assyrian podcast. What you just heard is the introduction from Obie's opus, a book written by today's guest, Obie Yadgar. I thought there was no better way to introduce Obie than through his own words. He's a radio announcer and a DJ, a writer, and a Vietnam War veteran. His passion for music and writing is as clear as his love for his late mother, his late wife, 2 daughters, and 3 grandsons. I'm always touched by the stories of successes and regrets from Assyrians who've lived in diaspora for a long time, and Obie's anecdotes and stories are no different. He sounds like a loving grandfather and an incredible dad, and a wonderful husband who has seen and experienced loss and grief up close, but has also known joy in the depths of his soul, joy brought to him by true love, for his family and for the music that continues to uplift him and has the power to save him in his darkest hours. As he works to write his memoir and continues to tell his story, I hope this interview too will be a piece of him shared with everyone who listens to this podcast and all those who love him. This episode is brought to you by all of us here at the Assyrian Podcast. We love bringing you stories of Assyrians from around the world, and we hope you continue to listen and share our episodes. And now, without further ado, here's Obelit, Obie Yadgar.
It's always a pleasure for me to speak with an Assyrian. I miss Assyrians and the Assyrian sound and the Assyrian feel. I live in Wisconsin, and there aren't many Assyrians here. Yeah, so I miss that. So it's my pleasure indeed.
I think I first heard about you because we have a nomination form, and somebody filled out the nomination form and said we should talk to you on the podcast. And so I Googled you, and I started reading one of your books and followed you on Facebook, and I was like, I've got to talk to him. This will be a fun conversation. So I've been looking forward to this.
The pleasure is mine. I'm going to enjoy it.
Funny enough, a couple weeks ago, we had an episode on the podcast called What is in a Name? And it was about the case for Assyrian names. One of my colleagues, Odessa, interviewed a bunch of people about naming traditions and how that has evolved in the Assyrian community. Your name is not strange to me. I had a childhood friend named Obelit. But I still am curious if you know your name story and how your parents came up with your name.
Absolutely. Mine, the person who came up with my name was Rabbi Binyamin Ersanus. Rabbi Binyamin Ersanus, Freidun Autoraya, and another member. It was the Three Musketeers, so to speak. They were very much involved politically, literally, and all of that. And as you know, Freidun Autoraya eventually ended up in Russia. And Rabbi Binyamin Ersanus was the great Assyrian poet, playwright, historian, you name it, he did it. And he's the one who named me. He was my mother's uncle. He was my grandfather's brother. So he's the one who named me, and he named me after King Ashur Ubelit the First, who ruled Mesopotamia around 1300 BC. And then he's one of the early kings who made Assyria a powerhouse. So my great uncle named me after him, Obelit, and without the Ashur prefix, just Obelit. And then growing up in Iran, everybody called me Obelit. When I came to the U.S. in high school, and I didn't know any English, and in high school, nobody could pronounce Obelit, and the teachers couldn't pronounce Obelit. So it got to be a pain in the neck. And one day, one of the teachers said, Obie, your name is Obie, and it stuck. I've stuck ever since, Obie. So that's the history of my name.
I always wonder about folks who have these historical names in the Assyrian community. If growing up, like, you clearly know the story of your name and where it comes from, but did you ever feel this sense of I don't know if grandeur is the right word, but this sense that, like, my name has such historical impact, or like historical context and just history behind it, and like nobody can pronounce it? Was there a frustration on your part about that?
In the early years, there was, and there was one even in Iran. I was born in Baghdad, and when I was a year old, from what family tells me, when I was a year old, the family moved to Tehran. And so we lived in Tehran, and even there, people had difficulty pronouncing Obelit, Obelit. In Assyrian at the house, it was Obelit,
Mm.
but outside it was Obelit.
Mm.
So it created confusions. And then back in the U.S., Americans are not very good at pronouncing names. They tend to butcher them, and they just absolutely destroyed my name. I really do feel a connection to my past, to King Ashur Obelit, and to everything Assyrian. As you know, the Assyrian Empire extended into the Caucasus, into Anatolia, which is the current day Turkey, parts of Egypt, even, and of course to the Persian Gulf, and so on. And it really was a great empire. So one of my heartbreaks is the falling of the empire. In fact, my cousin Alfred, who's a filmmaker, and I have done a little video on what I regret about our empire falling, and that it never rose again. And I always wonder why. Why did it not rise again? That's a mystery that will always haunt me. Yeah. So we did an essay on this subject called "Looking for Lamassu." Looking for Lamassu, and it's really quite good, I think. It's quite good. Yeah.
Is it a video that we can access and watch?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's on Vienmo.
Okay.
What is that? Yeah. It's called "Looking for Lamassu." Looking for
Okay, cool.
Lamassu. Yeah, Alfred did the editing and the filming, and I wrote the script and voiced it, and it was filmed. We filmed it in my studio and in my study at home, and it turned out pretty good, actually. Yeah, it turned out pretty good.
I'll find the video and we'll link it so that listeners can watch the video. You talked about how your family moved from Iraq to Tehran when you were 1. Why was that?
The usual migration, and yeah, because actually my folks are from Iran. My mother and most of them were born in Urmi, and in the village of Digala. Yeah, Digala is I'm thinking about a 20-minute drushki ride, from the city of Urmi to Digala. And so my family's from there, actually. Yeah, all of them. And I've been to Digala many times, and I have a series of essays. I have about 28 essays on my visits to Urmi, and sometimes I connect it to Vietnam because I was in Vietnam, and my father was from Gengachan. Yeah, and people say that people from Gengachan are nuts. So I know they'll come after me. So they met in Iraq, of course, married and all of that. Yeah. So that's the connection there. But our main connection is to Urmi, because and our dialect is the dialect of the Urmuzhnaya.
You talk in one of your books about your connection to the radio and how you always listened to the radio, even as a kid, growing up in Tehran. I'd love to hear more about that experience from you and what listening to the radio at a young age meant to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and in fact, I wrote an essay on that, which is part of a book I'm going to put together, or maybe a podcast, I'm not sure yet, of the 28 essays, and I call them Musing with My Simavar. That's the
Cute.
title of the book, Musing with My Simavar. And my connection to radio, when I lived in Tehran, we had a shortwave radio. And in those days, I'm looking at the 14th century. I mean, it goes that far back. In those days, we all had shortwave radio. And at night, I would frequently turn off the lights, and our radio was an old Philips. It was a big radio with fancy dials, and I would dial in stations, as many as I could find, and I found many in the Caucasus, and particularly in Azerbaijan. And there was one radio station that had evening concerts, and I would frequently listen to them. And of course, they were heavy on Tchaikovsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, Borodin, and all the great Russian composers. And I still remember the closing lines of the announcer. The announcer spoke in Turkish, Azerbaijani Turkish, and I still remember his closing words: "Bizim konsertimiz kotaldı." Our concert is over. I'm assuming that's the translation. And so that was my love for radio going way back. And I've loved music all my life. I mean, I have loved music. I love music. And if I had a camera, I would show you the CDs packing the cabinets here. I've loved music all my life, and all kinds of music. And I would listen to this show a lot. And when I came to the U.S., I continued listening to music, and I went through high school, and then I'm a college dropout. I didn't do well in college, so I'm a dropout. And what I know comes from the streets. What I know comes from the streets, but music was always in the background. I listened to early on to jazz. I listened to jazz quite a bit. In fact, my first radio show as a DJ was a jazz show in San Diego. It was a cool jazz show, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and people like that. And I just absolutely loved jazz. And then I worked in St. Louis for a while for an NPR station there. And I did actually 3 shows. I did a classical music radio show from 6 to midnight, weeknights. And I did kind of a jazz show Saturday night. And I helped engineer a big band's show, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, and all of that. And it continued. And then from there, I moved on to Milwaukee. I worked for a radio station here that was all classical. I did morning drive, which was usually from 6 till 10, something like that. And I chose my own music, Brahms and Vivaldi, Aldero Vandini. Yeah, so I did that. I had music in my head all day, and that continued. I worked in Chicago for a while at the WNIB radio in Chicago, and it was all classical. In 2002, I retired from radio. And then 20 years later, I went back into radio. What happened was my wife passed away last year. We were married, my God, about 60 years.
Wow.
Ishti,
Wow.
60, Ishti Shinne. And we were married that long, and then she passed away, and that just shattered my world. It just destroyed me. And then one day, this must have been in August, this past August, when things were really bleak. It was a dark day. I mean, it was a dark day, and I couldn't breathe. It was that bad. And then just out of the blue, I decided to call the station I had listened to for many years, asking, hey, have you got a gig for me? As it happened, the general manager had been one of my old listeners. And when he saw the caller ID, yeah. So he called me in, we had a conversation, and I believe November 4th, I started a Sunday morning show, just 1 hour, from 8 to 9, just Sundays, and that's all classical music, and we call it Obie's Opus after my book. I play whatever I want, and they never tell me what to do and what not to do, and that's a good thing because I know what I'm doing. Then in that hour, I blend music from the Renaissance to classical period with Mozart, to early romantic Schumann, late romantic Tchaikovsky. I blend that whole thing in 1 hour. It doesn't give me much time. You sneeze and the hour's over. So, but I am really enjoying myself. And when I went on the air the first day, the general manager was on the air with me so as to introduce me to the audience and all of that. Not only that, but help me with the equipment because I didn't know the equipment, which was fine. But the moment I turned on the microphone, I kid you not, the moment I turned it on, it was as if 20 years ago were yesterday. It was there. It was there, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I just absolutely love it. Love it. It's me and microphone, and it's my world. Yeah.
Hey, you're in your element.
I am. A radio studio. I walk in a radio studio, I'm home. I feel very comfortable in a radio studio. When I was in Vietnam, I was a combat correspondent with the 4th Infantry Division in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. And in the big base camp, which was headquarters for the 4th Division, Camp Enari in the Central Highlands, there was, of course, the motor pool where the tanks and the APCs and all that were kept. And these people put a little radio station in the motor pool. I think the radio station broadcast about an hour a day in the afternoon. And so I used to frequently go visit the DJs there, and they would put a record on, and all of a sudden a tank would start rumbling, moving, and that of course shakes the ground, and you can see the needle on the LP jump. So it's an unusual place to put a radio station, but there you have it. And so that was part of my connection with the radio too. Although again, I was a correspondent with the infantry and cover battles and all of that and go back to a base camp and write up the stories. Yeah. So yeah. But my connection has always been with music, and it's been heavy. The great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake. And I firmly believe that. I really do. You have to have music. And I have music in my house all day. It's always playing, whether it's jazz, whether it's Coltrane or Miles Davis, or whether it's Brahms or Beethoven or Mozart, Haydn, and all of these. It's music on all the time. And I just love it.
My husband and I have had this conversation about if you had to lose one of your senses, which one, if you had the choice, which one would you not want to part with? And he always says hearing, because he can't imagine what life would be like if he couldn't listen to music.
He is so right. I damaged part of my hearing in Vietnam, artillery, because I was in the artillery for just a short while, and one night we had 6 guns, 6 howitzers, and I was on the 6th gun, and one night we shot 800 rounds from what I'm told, a unit of the 1st Air Cavalry Division had run into an ambush, and we shot around them. I'm told 800 rounds that night, and walked them out of the ambush. And by morning I was deaf. And eventually my hearing came back, but my tinnitus never did. Yeah, so I can't hear the silence of the night. I can't hear that. But at the same time, I went into music. It just really, it's added so much joy to my life. One more thing, I stuttered growing up. I stuttered heavily growing up. I kid you not. And And I worked on it myself just to get rid of it. Just to get little by little, I did, and I eventually ended up on the radio. Go figure.
What a journey.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It's been wonderful.
I'm struck by all the ways in which music has been a companion in your life through joys and sorrows. But what I'm really struck by is the way in which going back to the radio and getting back to music pulled you out of your most recent sort of hole after the passing of your wife. 60 years is a long time to spend with
It
somebody.
is. It is.
And without that person, I can imagine how your whole world gets turned upside down. There's a way in which you've done everything a certain way for 60 years. That's 6 decades. It's so long, but getting back to the radio and the music pulled you out of that. I'm really struck by that and the connection between that and what you talked about in Vietnam and how, there would be, you're in the middle of a war and there was still a radio station for people to listen to music at night. And I wonder in what ways that was also a way for people to be able to deal with just the trauma of war and be able to escape in some way, but also like throw themselves into a piece of joy that would allow them to work through all the things they were going through.
Oh, sure. I had a little transistor radio, and I would frequently dial in and try to find the station somewhere. And now and then I would find something. I never did find Brahms or Schumann or anything like that, but I found, you know, music from the Caucasus again, from China, and from various places. And especially craved what I especially craved was not only a good steak in the jungle, just a little cold water. Canteen water stinks. So, so just a little cold water, just a little cold water. And then I craved steaks. I craved kipte. I craved shurba. I craved our own music. I craved a little sheikhani. Geez, somebody give me a sheikhani. But of course, I never found any of that. Wherever you go, the Assyrians in you. I mean that's you. For me, of course, I'm an Assyrian. I'm a Siraya. It's Autoraya, and wherever I go, because that spirit goes with you. It's in there, the language. But I crave the language. I think I told you earlier. I crave speaking it. I'm a little rusty because I have nobody to speak it to. And I crave hearing it. And I crave the little Assyrian bombast. Nasha mutmara. You've heard that before.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
I'm right, you're wrong. That's all there's to it.
I love it. Did you grow up in a musical or music loving family? Did your parents
No,
listen to Assyrian music?
no, no. My parents, well, no, of course, occasionally we did, but we really never had any encouragement in the arts.
Mhm.
In the arts, don't go in the arts. Just become an engineer or become a doctor, and forget the arts. How can you forget the arts? The arts are the soul of a nation, really. If you look at the Assyrian art and architecture, you're looking to ancient times, the contribution Assyrians made to the arts, to literature, to libraries. It's enormous. So that's part of our lives. Art is important.
Two things I'm thinking about. One is I can hear this in the way you speak when we're having a conversation too. And I think what it reminds me of is like announcers who do sports broadcasting.
Mhm.
When you listen to someone announcing a baseball game, they talk about it, and they talk about everything that is happening to make you feel like you're actually there watching it. And there's a way in which they have to choose their words so carefully to take you along this journey. And I hear you doing the same thing when you are explaining sitting with your grandmother in the village. I can feel the breeze, I can hear the sounds, I can sort of visualize the whole scene. Did you have to practice to be able to do that, or is that sort of descriptive work, did that come naturally to you?
It comes naturally. One of the basic rules of radio is that since you obviously don't see the audience, you talk to one person, not a big crowd, just one person, a friendly person. You talk to that person, and that's how you create intimacy, because it's you, the equipment in front of you, your compact discs and LPs around you, and then the audience, the microphone, which is your conduit to the audience. So if you have to create that intimacy, you have to pull them into the same room, and yeah, that's how it starts. When I started in radio, I had a jazz little. I was again. This was for a short time in San Diego. It was a jazz show late at night, and I guess I did it well enough. I'd get all these horny women calling me, and I could hear the ice in their cocktail glass tingling, and so you have to create that. You have to create that. And years later, when I worked in morning drive in Milwaukee, one morning, and again, I did all classical music. And one morning, I miscued a CD. I was going to play something by Vivaldi, the great Baroque composer, but I miscued it, and I played this deadly. I mean, this thing was about the ugliest piece of music you've ever heard. It was just a solo recorder at 6:45 in the morning, and if you want, you can bleep me out on this one. I get the phone rings and I answer, and there's this guy in a quiet and dark voice. He says, "Of all the beautiful music in the world, you have to play this shit." And he hangs up. He hangs up. And to this day, I laugh about that. He was right. The piece was deadly. I finally took it off the air. I put something else on, and we were okay. So yeah, intimacy. You've got to create that. Through the years, I got to know the audience, by first name, and I'd get invitations to their homes. That comes with creating that intimacy. We're part of each other. We're part of each other, and I think that comes naturally. The same as the way it did after 20 years. The moment I turned on the microphone, I was home. I just kept rattling on. And yeah. So it's inside. The same as writing. You see, writing is inside me. I can't understand anything unless I write it down. And write it down with a beautiful fountain pen. Oh, I'm a fountain pen freak. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Pelicans and Mont Blancs and ambassadors, and you name it. So and the first draft of whatever I write is always written in fountain pen. And then eventually, of course, I go to the computer and get everything organized. Yeah.
That's your instrument. It's like a musician who plays music. They have to have a good piece of equipment.
And I get good paper for it too. There's a paper called Tomo River. Tomo River is made in Japan, made strictly for fountain pens, and things don't spread. The writing is crisp. But really, that's also one of the great joys of life, to see a word coming out of your mind, going through your hands and fingers and the pen, and then being printed on paper. It's absolutely lovely. It's absolutely lovely to see that.
There's another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about listening to the radio as a kid, and how the act of listening to the radio has evolved over the years. My family left Iran much later than you did in the late 90s. And one of the memories I have is listening to Voice of America with my aunt. And what we would do is we would just lay in bed and listen to the radio. We'd listen to the whatever programming was on. It was sort of our gateway to the outside world and content that was not moderated by the government. What I remember about that is that when we were listening to the programming, there was nothing else we were doing. There was this stillness. Whereas now, if I'm listening to the radio, my dad programmed KQED, which is the Bay Area NPR station, into my first car. And that's all I ever listened to in the car. But if I'm listening to it, I'm driving, or I'm listening to something while I'm cleaning or doing the laundry. And I don't have that act of like stillness of sitting down and listening to the radio. And I wonder if that evolution is something that you recognize as someone who is on the other end, who knows that people listening to you might be doing a whole host of things and they just have, their ear with you, and how that has changed your experience maybe on the other end, or also maybe as a radio listener.
In the early days, when I did morning drive is usually done from from 6 to 10 in the morning, and people are traveling, so you keep your music short, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, and that's your limit. That's how people listen. I think it is a rare occasion that at night you turn the radio on and listen to classical music and do whatever work you're doing. For one thing, there are no more classical music stations left. I mean, there might be one or two here, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it, which is absolutely pathetic. But that's how it is. So for my part, I just put on my music at night when I'm doing some work. I put on say a Schubert string quartet or Beethoven string quartet, and just listen to them, or Mozart, or something nice and quiet, or a Brahms symphony. As Brahms, especially when it's autumn, because when I hear Brahms, I see autumn colors. Brahms music to me represents the bright reds, the fiery reds, the golds, the browns, all the wonderful earth colors in autumn. That's Brahms. That, to me anyway. That's Brahms. And when I want to seek true romance, I mean, just fall in love, I listen to Schumann, and I listen to Chopin. The great early romantics, because I mean, romance oozes out of their music. So at night, there's no classical radio anymore. So I just put on my own CDs, and these are the same CDs I use on my show, because everything on my show comes from my library. Yeah, so I do that. But classical radio is gone. It creates true inspiration for one thing, because there are so many elements in it. There are so many elements. You listen to Beethoven, for example. Beethoven was so well read. He read Rumi, Ferdowsi, Saadi, all of these great Persian writers, and he read writers from other places of the world. He, of course, knew Goethe, great German writer. In fact, there's a wonderful story about Beethoven and Goethe. And there are 37 versions of this story. Goethe and Beethoven were walking in the park in Vienna, was strolling in the park, having a conversation. And then who comes up? The emperor's entourage approaches, prince and princess and the emperor himself. And they approach. Goethe steps aside, takes his hat off, and bows to the group, whereas Beethoven crosses his arms, purses his lips, and walks right through the throng, and everybody steps aside, including the emperor, for Beethoven, and Beethoven just goes straight through. And later on, Goethe says, in so many words, "Hey, man, you shouldn't be doing that. This is the royalty." And Beethoven says, "Listen, there are 100 princes, but there's only one Beethoven." And I love it. I love it. I love it. So you listen to this man's music, and it's absolutely incredible what he did, because most of his writing life, he was deaf.
Yeah.
And he wrote the Eighth Symphony, Ninth Symphony, Seventh Symphony. The guy's deaf. God made only one Beethoven, and he put him on the earth to spread joy to people. Really, because there is no other Beethoven. That's it.
Yeah, his whole story is incredible considering his circumstances and the fact that he was deaf, but like what he could produce or compose in terms of music, and the fact that we still listen to it, and not that we just listen to it, but it has been an inspiration for so much that has come after him. You hear his pieces referenced in other songs and in other works. And so it's incredible for one person to be that source of inspiration for so much in the world of music so many years later.
So much indeed. That the same thing reflects in the world of writers. I had the pleasure of interviewing John Updike. And oh my God, I mean, this was a phone interview. I think we did it for 25 minutes or so, and I'm sitting there and just listening to this man who was so casual, non-condescending, just a sweet man, and he was just wonderful. Years later, I interviewed Vincent Price, the actor Vincent Price, and oh my God, to listen to this man speak the English language, it just made my mouth water. And it just a wonderful person to speak with. I mean, really, so much class. So much class. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
John Updike is the author who wrote Rabbit Run.
Yep, that's John Updike. Yeah, John Updike. Yeah. Oh, he was a great one. Oh my God. I really, in fact, I interviewed another writer, Lawrence Block. Lawrence Block is a mystery writer, and his main character was something or other Scudder. I forget the last name. And in this novel, there's a character named Tiklat Palazar. What?
What?
I kid you not. I kid you not. I said, hold it. So we started talking about Tiklat Palazar. We were friends right after that.
A lot of our listeners, and even me, like the things I know about Vietnam are the things that I've read in novels and in pieces that have emerged from that time, and also music that emerged from that time, like protest music against the war. I'm in Michigan or Detroit, so lots of Motown music came out around that time. I'm wondering what your experience was both being in Vietnam, and then what was it like to come back home and find out how people were feeling about the war?
It was sad that when the World War II soldier returned, he was hailed as the hero. And they were heroes. They were really heroes. I mean, the battles they fought, just incredible. I got to Vietnam on Christmas Day, 11 o'clock in the morning, 1967. 67, about a month or so after that, the Big Tet Offensive started. And so it was really a sad day. I was drafted and I was sent to Vietnam. again, I spent my time there. I wrote for the various magazines, but I was still a soldier, 2 bandoliers of ammunition, rifle, and I always used to hide my camera because that would have been a perfect bullseye for a sniper. And so I would hide that. I would drape a handkerchief over it or something. Vietnam teaches you something that you don't forget. It teaches you war. And war you don't forget because it becomes a part of you. I mean, I wasn't out there to kill anybody. I'm a nice guy. You know, and fortunately, after a little while, I was switched to the Public Information Office, which hosted our, the combat correspondents. So what we used to do, we used to go out with the infantry and on search and destroy missions and cover the battles. And if things really got really bad, we'd start shooting. The hell with the camera, forget it. And so then we would go back to the base camp for a few days, write up the stories, and the stories would go to Saigon if I remember correctly, and there they would be heavily edited. And then they were available for any news organization to pick up. So that was one experience. And I spent, again, a lot of scary nights with the infantry, just sitting, again, in villages or in the jungle and just chatting with them. And I remember one guy who had spent 1 year in Vietnam, had fought many battles. That was his last night in Vietnam. The next morning, the chopper would come in and pluck him out of the jungle and fly him to his base camp where he would prepare. But when I recall, he just sat with his arms around, clutched around his knees, and just rocking slowly, rocking. He'd made it, not a scratch, a whole year in Vietnam, and that teaches you a lot. Another time we were on patrol, and I remember we took a break in the jungle. One guy sat about, I don't know, maybe 6-7 feet away from me. He sat on the path, and as it happened, he sat on a booby-trapped grenade, so that when he got up, the pin pulled, and the grenade went off, and he was badly wounded. Another guy 15 feet away, he got shrapnel wounds. I didn't get anything. So that teaches you something. The dark nights, you look, you're sitting on the perimeter behind a machine gun, and the bushes just a few feet away, and you hope the VC won't crawl upon you and cut your throat. And so all of those things stay with you. And then the laughter also. There was laughter. I was covering a unit bivouacked outside a torn-up village, and we had to dig in foxholes at night. So I sat on a foxhole with a Puerto Rican. And so we started talking, and here's a Puerto Rican and here's an Assyrian. We're in the same foxhole, and the rice paddies in front of us. Fortunately, there was a full moon that night, so we weren't going to get any sapper attacks or anything like that. So we were talking. I offered him a little raisin, and he took the raisin, and he had a toothache. I said, if you take a piece of garlic, and I said, what side is your toothache on? He said, if I remember, he said left side. I said, then take a piece of garlic and put it in your right ear, and that'll take care of your toothache. He said, what? I said, what? That's an old story from Urmi. I had heard that when I was very young. Hey, you have a toothache, on the left side, put a piece of garlic in your right ear. That'll take care of it. So all through the night, I would hear him chuckling all through the night. And the two of us just sat there hoping the VC wouldn't attack us. And this guy's from time to time chuckling. Garlic in my what ear? That there was a lot of laughter too. That stays with you. So when you come back, you bring all of that with you. That many of us were sent to Vietnam, really not believing in the war. I didn't believe in the war. I was living in the country. The country gave me shelter. I had to pay it back. You see, I had to do my part, whether I believed in the war or not. And so that changes you. But in reality, and I don't hide this, in a way, I wanted to go to Vietnam, not because I believed in the war. Oh God, no. But I was a writer, you see, and I had to have that experience. And I had to have that experience, not knowing if I would ever come back alive. But I had to have that experience. Yeah. Yeah.
You said you had your camera with you. Do you still have photos that you took while you were there?
No, the photos weren't mine. You see,
Oh.
we took them, that they of course went with the stories. And again, as we wrote up the stories, the whole thing was shipped. Although I do have my Pentax camera from Vietnam. I still have it. Yeah, no, war changes you. And when we came back, people were criticizing us, baby killers and this and that. I didn't kill any babies, and that really was not a nice thing to do to young men who had no choice. We were sent there. Some of course there was there were a lot of bad things going on in a war, as they do in any war, but not all of us were a part of that. See, and that was so hard, that we were really garbage coming back, and we'd done our share.
And
Yeah.
it feels like the anger and the frustration was misdirected, because so many soldiers didn't have a choice, didn't want to be there. There was a draft, for God's sake. So they all had to go unless they ran away to Canada or something, or
Right.
there was a reason they could stay. So it feels like there was frustration on maybe Americans' part for not wanting their country to be involved somewhere that, they felt like it shouldn't be, but that anger shouldn't have been directed at people who were coming back who just did what they had to do.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, right, right. We had no choice. We
Mm.
had no choice. It was a very strange war. It was not a war. You didn't set out there to win a war, because it really wasn't your war.
Mhm.
That was not our war. You have people who are fighting for their country. Somebody attacks the US, you think everybody's going to sit back and, oh, please come on in. No, no. So we were not invited there, really. Well,
Mhm.
South Vietnam did, but they didn't count.
Yeah.
But all of that aside, we lost close to about 58,000 dead, some 500,000 wounded, and I think about that. I visited the Vietnam Monument in Washington, D.C., that huge
Mhm.
granite. And I just stood there, just mesmerized at this site, at all those names. And I lost some acquaintances there too. And I think about them, and it was unfair. It was unfair what happened to us. But you move on. You move on, but that will never leave you. That stays with you.
Have you, in years since then, obviously wars around the world have not stopped. Do you ever see similarities between what you experienced in Vietnam and what others generations after you have experienced in Iraq or Afghanistan or other places around the world?
Every soldier has a connection, whether he fought in the Napoleonic War, or whether he fought in World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq War One, Iraq War Two. There's a connection. And when you get together, you talk about, oh yeah, we did this and we did that. I had a good friend. I had a good friend who's a Civil War reenactor. Yeah, these are groups who reenact uh, the various units in the Civil War, the Southern units, the Northern units. What is it? The 10th Wisconsin or the first? I I I forget the units, but when they're sitting around and talking, well, we did this to you at Shiloh, and we did this to you at Cemetery Hill, and all of that. It's we
Mhm.
as if they're part of the northern soldiers, the southern soldiers. We did that. So even in that respect, there's a connection. There's a connection with soldiers. When I go to the VA, for various medical reasons, and we're sitting in the waiting room, all soldiers, all former soldiers, and all of a sudden, you start talking. First Marine Division, Second Marine Division, First Infantry Division, First Air Cavalry, 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne. All of a sudden, there's a connection. Because once a soldier, you're always a soldier. That stays with you. That stays with you, and that's one of the great wonders of life. Because you have so many things to enrich your soul, to enrich your body, and all of that creates memories. And memories, I have many of them. I have many of them, and I told you I've started my memoir, and this is going to be not I was born on such and such day, not the typical memoir. It'll be sort of a stream of consciousness memoir, the way Jack Kerouac wrote, stream of consciousness. So it'll be that it'll be that kind of a memoir, not necessarily for publication, just for my family to remember me, for the grandsons to, oh yeah, that's what they call me Poppy. That's what Poppy did. Yeah, just to write and tell them what their grandmother was like, and how I met their grandmother, and what war is like, and what it's like to sit in the same room with a guy like Vincent Price and have a nice conversation, have a donut with a guy who's really so cultured. He had a magnificent art collection, Vincent Price, and I think I mentioned earlier the way he spoke the English language. Oh my God, unbelievable, unbelievable. Yeah.
That's a really wonderful thing for you to do for your family, because I wish that I had that. I never got to meet my grandfathers,
Uh,
either of them. And the stories I've heard about them from my parents or from my grandmas are far and few in between. So I think that's a wonderful thing to leave your grandkids, and even beyond that. So I love that you're doing that.
they live right next door, actually.
Oh,
My
that's
my
awesome.
daughter Sadie is a labor and delivery nurse, and they live next door. And I have three grandsons, 14, 10, and 5, and they live next door. A couple years back, I had to do a TV commercial for a store, and they needed a young kid to go with me, so I took Max. He was around 9 at the time, and he and I both auditioned in a studio for the position. I got the gig, but young Max didn't, because he was too young. They got somebody at least 2, 3 years older. But one of the greatest joys in my life was that morning auditioning with my grandson for this commercial, the two of us. The kid knew his lines instantly. It took me half of the morning to remember my lines. I mean, he was that good. And afterwards we stopped at some place and had something to drink and had some ice cream. Do you know how much joy one can get from something like that? I'll never forget that day. And so I hope he too will remember that day. If he doesn't, I'll for sure will mention it in the memoir. Hey, Max, that's we did this together. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
I
Yes.
did see that you're maybe teaching him how to shave.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I'm heavy into shaving. I mean, straight razors, and I've been shaving with a straight razor for decades now. And but I'm slowing down a little because my precision isn't where it used to be in my hands. So I have to be careful. And you're dealing with an open blade. And so yeah, and he's starting to get little fuzz. He's got a little stash there, and I started teaching him all the correct techniques of shaving. Most men in the U.S. don't know how to shave because nobody taught them, and they get razors with 5 or 6 blades. You've got 5 or 6 sharp blades scraping your skin. That's insane. That's insane. So I set him up with his own shaving brush, his own cream, soap and cream, his own razor, his own styptic pencil in case he nicks himself, and just teaching him the techniques of
How
how.
did you learn the technique?
Well, they nobody taught me. Nobody taught me, but since my 20s, I wanted to shave with a straight razor. For some reason, I suppose it was the romance of it. And it took me, and life got in the way, and I didn't get a chance to do it until many years later. And I started with just watching videos, and I knew some people, and eventually I studied honing a razor, sharpening a razor. That's it takes skill. And I studied with 3 of the greatest of them all. These guys are masters. I mean, they know everything about honing. So I figure I have a PhD in honing because I studied with these characters. And it's for me, just the act of making lather on your face with this beautiful brush and this great cream and soap, and just create lather protection for your face, and then sharpen your razor, strop your razor on a big leather thing, and then start shaving. And then it's you and the mirror and the equipment. So it's that hour or so you spend in the shave den, away from everything. It's your world, it's you. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about writing, I'm thinking about pieces of music I should put in my show, and I'm thinking of all of that. And it's absolute joy. It is absolute joy because it's you. It really, in a way, it's a variation of the radio station. It's you and nobody else. It's you. So it's your world, and I enjoy it. So I'm trying to teach that to Max, and hopefully he will teach it to Henry, who's the middle one, and hopefully he'll teach it to young Will. Young Will, provided he's not a tackle for the Green Bay Packers, because the kid is really stocky. Oh my God, he keeps bumping into things. Yeah, but I love them dearly, and they're so much part of me. And my girls too. I have 2 daughters. Sadie is the younger one. Sadie is named after my mother. My mother's name was Sade.
Mm.
Yeah, and my mother passed away at age 35. Oh yeah, yeah, and I was about 12 years old also. To this day, I think about her every day. I think about my Yimmy every day, and oh, she was a sweetheart. She was a sweetheart. To be a grown up and be able to speak to your mother, I didn't get that chance, and I really regret that. I really regret that, and yeah, that was a big loss. But anyway, it's so I I stay as close to my grandsons as possible, and I hope they will impart that to their children, to their children. My other daughter, Sonia, is named after my grandmother, Sona.
Hmm.
And she is in Minnesota. She's a dietitian and a network marketer and all of that. Yeah, yeah. You probably see her a lot on on Facebook, Sonia Schunenberg. If you see the name, that's my daughter.
Oh, I think I have seen that
Yeah,
name.
yeah. That's my Sonia. Yeah, and
Oh,
she calls in 5 times a day to check on me, 7 days a week. Yeah,
oh,
and the little
I
next door checks on me constantly. Yeah.
I love that. I love that the family that you and your wife um built together is so close knit. And I'm sorry to hear about the sort of losses you've been through in your life. I can see how, losing your mom at 12 would be hard. Were you close to your dad?
No, not really. My father was an alcoholic, and abusive,
Mm,
abusive to my mother, and we've never forgiven him for that. And because she was such a wonderful person, she really was. She was just a sweet person, and my wife uh, raised the girls. I mean, the the both of us raised the girls the way my mother would have raised us later on. And so in the early on, she of course raised us, and I think my brother and I have an older brother in Chicago, and I think she did okay, even though she left us so very young. Much of her remained with us and helped us in our journey. I, as we grew older, because I think we turned out to be good citizens and of a country. In fact, my mother had put us on the 1946 immigration quota, and her dream, America was her dream. She was going to come out here, and we were going to live happily ever after, and all of that. This country was her dream,
mm,
but she didn't make it because we came in 1946. We came in 1957. We had to wait 11 years, and she died a couple of years before that. And so that's another tragedy, yeah, in our lives, in my life, that she didn't get a chance to do that, but she made it possible for her two boys to do that. And in the end, uh, we both, I think, as I said, turned out to be decent people, decent citizens, and we gave to this country as it gave to us, and you have to do that.
yeah.
To do that, yeah, yeah.
And
So
you lived out your mom's dream for you,
oh yeah.
which I'm sure would have made her proud.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure she would have been proud. I'm sure she would have been proud. But as I said, one of the greatest regrets of my life is when I didn't get a chance to sit with her. Say I was 45, and sit and just talk to my mother. I never got that chance. And when you're a kid, you don't really talk that much, that much to your parents anyway. And yeah, I miss that. I regret that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that you have had to go through that, but it sounds like the wonderful woman that your mom was had such a big impact on you. And I think that's what parents hope for in whatever time they have with their kids, that they can help them become capable, independent people who will always look back to what they were taught as kids. And it sounds like your mom did that for you.
She did. Yeah, she did. And again, she was very Europeanized, my mother. Again, she was born in Digala and married in Iraq, came back to Iran. Uh, she was very Europeanized, and I think and really caring. She was really a good mother and a sweet person and a decent human being. And I remember once I had bought a little tiny truck. I found it some little store. Didn't cost me much. And I went home and showed it to her, and she really praised my purchase. She liked the way the truck looked and all of that. I will never forget that. I will never forget that she said that, oh, that is a beautiful truck, she said. And so I do that with the kids. With the kids, when they play soccer or play flute, or Max, who's at a German contest, German language contest today. He speaks German pretty good. Yeah, and yeah. Another regret that I have, before I forget, I failed to teach my children Assyrian. I forget. I failed to do that, and because life gets in the way. You're working. You're trying to bring food into the house. I regret that I did not teach them. I mean, they know a few words. Yeah, but I regret that. I wish I had.
How did you and your wife meet?
We met. Oh my God, we met on a blind date over spaghetti dinner. I don't recall much of the spaghetti dinner, but a good friend of mine we were in college both. That's before I dropped out. He had an XKE Jaguar, and he was driving down the street in San Francisco one day, and right in the next lane, who pulls up? This gorgeous girl in a Jaguar sedan. So they started making signals and all of that, and they pulled over him, and so she invited him to dinner. And she said, bring a couple of friends, because she had 3 roommates. And I didn't really want to go. He said, well, let's go. So we went, and we paired off quickly. He, of course, went with, her name was Tanya. She was a gorgeous girl, just beautiful. And then Jack was the other guy. He went with a girl named Lori, who used to clomp around the apartment with these shoes. Clomp, clomp, clomp. Oh, she was most unpleasant. I didn't care for her. And then, of course, there was Judy, and my wife Judy, and we hit it right off. We hit it right off. We danced, and interestingly enough, the way she fit in my arms, it was unusual. I mean, I danced with other women, but this one just felt right, you know. So then the next day, I asked her for a date after that night. So we were to meet at a restaurant, and the little shit stood me up. What? What? So I sat there and waited for this girl. She never showed up. The next morning, I showed up at her work, just outside her work. When she left, oh, hello. And then she turned red, blue, yellow, green. And I said, what happened? And she said she was afraid of me because I had a black turtleneck, and I was trying to be a writer. Black turtleneck and a corduroy jacket, and I guess I talked all kinds of nonsense about Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, so that I scared her. And but after that, so we started going out, and we stayed together after that. There were some partings, I had to do this, do that, but we were together ever since. And then we eloped. Actually, we went to Reno. She was working after her office closed. Did I have a car? Or she? Oh, she had a little Austin Healey Sprite, which is a tiny tiny little car. But we drove to Reno. We hit a snowstorm in the Sierra Nevadas, and we had to spend the night in an inn. And the next morning, we were having breakfast at this inn, and the trees outside were covered in snow, and it was such a novelistic scene. It really was. And I was writing it in my head. And as I said, I can't understand it unless I write it in my head. And then we got married in Reno. I had my black turtleneck on. I hadn't shaved for a few days. and she had her office suit on, and we got married. Yeah, in Reno, at the Chapel of the Bells. No, no Elvis stuff, but there were a couple of characters as witnesses there. And yeah, yeah, so we got married, and really that lasted 60 years. Oh, we had our ups and downs, mostly financially. I was out of work a couple of times, and things were hard. But that's a part of life, and we were together for all those years, and she was a wonderful girl. She really was, and she put up with me, uh, and she tried to fit, and she fit fairly well in the Assyrian world. I once introduced her to a distant cousin of mine in San Francisco. I said, "Auntie, this is my wife, Judy." And she looked up and down Judy and said, "Yeah, she's okay." So, all right. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful story, but more a beautiful and strong partnership. The memory of which is so clearly with you and will be with you because of the impact you both had on each other.
Yeah, she was at home among Assyrians. I mean, she
Mhm.
just felt at home. She cooked kipte, she cooked well, what did she do? Reza Khurush and all of that. She learned to do that through the years. Never learned Boishala, and couldn't stand the Rishakle. Oh my God. That made her sick. Oh, hey, what's life without Rishakle? Come on.
That's what my parents say, but I beg to differ.
Oh, Rishakle, and then Harissa.
That's a
Harissa.
good one.
Oh. My brother still makes harissa in Chicago, and he calls me. He says, "I made this beautiful harissa, and I have a heart attack here. Well, I'd like to be there having that harissa." Oh yeah, yeah.
There's nothing quite like Hadisa for Christmas. That is my favorite time of the year to have Hadisa.
Harissa is really heavenly food. It's just a simple thing. It takes time to make it, but
Mhm.
but it's simple. And that, what is it? We throw coriander. Is it coriander? Ground
Yeah,
coriander? Yeah,
coriander,
coriander, and then that heavy butter. Oh,
butter.
oh my. I mean, that's heaven. Yeah, but that's what I craved in Vietnam. I didn't crave fancy French dishes or Italian dishes, none of that. I craved, give me some kipte. Just somebody make some kipte. I craved
What
that. Somebody,
what did you eat in Vietnam as a
oh,
soldier?
we had in base camps, we had the mess halls.
Okay.
And you have your steaks and burgers and the steaks. I don't know where they got their steaks. We always said it's probably some dead VC. And when we were in the jungle, if the choppers could fly in some food for lunch or dinner, they did. But choppers couldn't fly in all the time because that get shot down. So we had the sea rations. We had sea rations, and the sea rations have advanced considerably. There was spaghetti and various bean dishes, and so we had those. We had those, and just open up the can and chop away, and now and then you'd sit and shave. We'd get these damn plastic razors. Oh God, and make water in our helmet, a little. But anyway, and I once told myself, good Lord, if I ever get out of this place alive, I'm not going to touch those things. And I never did after that. No, never did. Yeah, but our food, yeah, we it was mostly sea ration in the jungle,
Mhm.
unless the choppers would fly in food. I think for Thanksgiving, I was there at Thanksgiving, they flew in for lunch. Uh, the chopper dropped the food off in big containers that kept the food hot, and the chopper flew away. Naturally, we ate, and the chopper came back and picked up the stuff and left. So yeah, so that was our food. It was a lot of beer. Geez, I don't remember on New Year's Eve, I must have put away 15 cans of beer and cigarettes, got beer and cigarettes, and yeah, it's an insane world. And toward the end, you, you have these strange feelings. You're lying down somewhere, and then all of a sudden, something inside you says, "Hey, there's stuff coming in." And then moments later, the rockets would fall in and the mortars. So you get this strange extra sense that things are happening or will happen. That's all part of war. Yeah, that's all part of, and it stays with you forever.
Yeah, sounds like it. Obie, it has been so wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate you sharing so much of yourself and your story so openly. I have looked forward to talking to you for a long time, and I am just so happy that we got to connect, and you, like I said, you shared so much of yourself so openly. I really, really appreciate that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You're an absolute delight to speak, Will. You are very welcome, and I thank you.
That's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next Tuesday.